The moment Sharon Harrington extended her hand to steady the elderly Japanese woman who had stumbled at Golden Dragon restaurant, she had no idea she was setting in motion a series of events that would utterly transform her life. The woman's teacup had tipped, spilling hot jasmine tea across the lacquered table, and without hesitation, Sharon had leapt from her solo lunch table, napkins in hand. As she helped clean up and called for the waiter in her broken Mandarin, which she realized too late was not even the right language, the elderly woman had looked at her with such piercing eyes that Sharon felt as if her very soul was being examined. "Thank you, child," the woman had said in perfect English, her accent subtle but musical. "My son always says Americans are too busy to notice others falling." The woman had pressed something into Sharon's palm before her companion had helped her out of the restaurant, a small, intricately carved jade pendant that Sharon now wore around her neck, having no idea it was worth more than 3 months of her salary at Carson and Reed Real Estate. "You're daydreaming again, Shah," said Meg, dropping a stack of listing papers on Sharon's desk with a dramatic thud. "Mr. Carson's been looking for the Thompson portfolio for 20 minutes, and you've been staring at that weird necklace thing." "Aye," Sharon startled, her fingers automatically reaching for the pendant. "Sorry, it reminds me of something." Yeah, your knight in shining armor who is going to rescue you from this desk job." Meg rolled her eyes. "Meanwhile, in the real world, where the rest of us live, we have the West Side property tour in 30 minutes, and you re-showing that run-down workshop on Bleecker." Sharon groaned. The workshop conversion was the least desirable listing in their portfolio, a former furniture restoration shop now being sold as a charming artistic space with commercial potential. In reality, it was dusty, probably had termites, and smelled perpetually of varnish. But as the newest agent at the firm, these were the properties she was stuck with. "The owner's son is meeting you there," Meg added, a hint of mischief in her voice. "And rumour has it he's loaded, inherited his dad's real estate empire. Maybe he'll fall madly in love with you and buy you a penthouse." "Very funny," Sharon muttered, gathering her materials. "The day a millionaire falls in love with me will be the day pigs fly over the Empire State Building." She had no idea how prophetic, and yet completely wrong, those words would be. The workshop on Bleecker Street was exactly as dismal as Sharon remembered, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun that filtered through grimy windows, the scent of wood polish and old memories hanging in the air. Sharon arrived early, as was her habit, straightening her blazer and checking her reflection in her compact mirror. Her curly brown hair was already rebelling against the morning's straightening attempt, and there was a small coffee stain on her white blouse that she tried to cover with her blazer. The sound of the door opening made her whirl around, plastering on her professional smile. "Welcome to—" The words died in her throat. The man who entered wasn't the stuffy executive type she'd been expecting. Instead, he was tall, with broad shoulders and a lithe athleticism to his movements that immediately caught her attention. His dark hair was slightly windswept, as if he'd been running, and his face, with high cheekbones that spoke of his Asian heritage and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light, was striking in a way that made her momentarily forget how to speak English. "I'm sorry I am late," he said, his voice a warm baritone with no trace of an accent. "Tai Chi ran longer than expected." He extended a hand. "Peter Sakamoto." As their hands touched, Sharon felt a jolt of something that had nothing to do with static electricity and everything to do with the way his eyes seemed to recognize her, though they'd never met. What she didn't know was that hanging around her neck was the jade pendant his grandmother had carried for 50 years, and that Peter Sakamoto had spent 2 weeks searching New York for the kind-hearted woman his mother couldn't stop talking about. "I am Sharon Harrington," she managed, withdrawing her hand perhaps a second too late, "from Carson and Reed, here to show you the workshop." Peter's eyes never left her face. "Yes, the workshop," he said softly. "Though I think I've found something far more interesting already." Sharon was no stranger to flirtatious clients. In the cutthroat world of New York real estate, she developed an immunity to smooth-talking investors and their meaningless compliments. But there was something different about the way Peter Sakamoto looked at her, not as a conquest or a stepping stone to a deal, but with genuine curiosity that made her cheeks warm despite her professional resolve. "So, Mr. Sakamoto," she began, flipping open her portfolio with perhaps more force than necessary. "Peter, please," he interrupted, his eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "Mr. Sakamoto is my father, and he is far more intimidating than I could ever hope to be." "Indeed, Peter," she conceded, trying to ignore how pleasantly his name rolled off her tongue. "This space offers nearly 2,000 square feet of potential. The previous owner ran a furniture restoration business here for 30 years, but with some vision, it could be transformed into almost anything," Peter finished, running his fingers reverently across an old workbench. "That is what I love about spaces like this. They hold memories, but they're not trapped by them." He looked up at her. "Don, do you think so?" Sharon blinked, momentarily thrown by the philosophical turn. Real estate clients usually wanted to talk square footage and investment potential, not the poetic value of empty spaces. Yes, I suppose that's true." Peter smiled, and it transformed his face completely, softening the sharp angles of his jawline. "Sorry, I get carried away sometimes. My father always says I am too sentimental for this business. He wants me to focus on luxury high-rises and commercial developments." He gestured around the dusty workshop. "But I see places like this and think about what they could become, with the right hands caring for them." Something in his words struck a chord with Sharon. How many times had she walked through properties and imagined them not as commission checks, but as homes filled with life and story? It was a perspective her boss would have scoffed at as unprofitable sentimentality. Actually, she found herself saying, "And there's an original architectural feature that wasn't to mentioned in the listing." She led him to what appeared to be a solid wall and pressed gently on a particular spot. A hidden panel swung open, revealing a small alcove with a circular window that cast dappled patterns across the wooden floor. And the original owner was a Japanese immigrant who incorporated elements from traditional tea houses. It is almost like a secret meditation space. Peter's eyes widened in genuine delight. "This is extraordinary. How did you discover it?" Then Sharon felt a flash of embarrassment. "I sometimes come here during lunch breaks to think. The energy in this room is different from anywhere else in the city." Instead of finding her admission strange, Peter looked at her with newfound respect. "You see it too," he said softly, almost to himself. Then, more clearly, "Would you have dinner with me tonight, Sharon? Not as a client and agent, but just two people who appreciate hidden spaces in a city that rarely slows down enough to notice them." The professional part of Sharon's brain sounded alarm bells. Dating clients was firmly against Carson and Reed's policies, not to mention her own rules for surviving in the competitive world of Manhattan real estate. But another part of her, the part that still believed in serendipity despite New York's best efforts to crush such notions, was already wondering what Peter Sakamoto would look like in candlelight. "I don't date clients," she said automatically, even as her heart raced traitorously. Peter's smile didn't falter. "What if I promised not to buy this property? Then I wouldn't have to be a client anymore?" Sharon couldn't help but laugh at his logic. "That would be terrible business practice on my part." "Maybe," he conceded, dark eyes twinkling. "But it might be excellent life practice." Before, Sharon could formulate a response. Her phone buzzed insistently. It was a text from her supervisor. Emergency at Parker Heights listing. Need you there now. I'm sorry, she said, genuinely disappointed. I have to go. Work emergency. Peter nodded, understanding but visibly disappointed. As she gathered her things in a rush, he called after her. What about tomorrow? Central Park by the Bethesda fountain. No real estate talk allowed. Sharon paused at the door, professionalism warring with the undeniable pull she felt toward this enigmatic man. 1:00, she said finally, surprising herself. Donna to be late. What she didn't know as she hurried out was that Peter had already made an offer on the property, well above asking price, before ever meeting her. And as he watched her leave, he touched the spot in his pocket where an identical jade pendant to the one around her neck had rested for years, given to him by his grandmother with the promise that someday he would find its match. The park bench felt cool beneath Sharon's thighs as she checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 1:17 p.m. She told herself she wasn't disappointed. This was exactly how these things went. Wealthy, attractive men made impulsive invitations they never intended to keep. She should be grateful, really. It saved her the ethical dilemma of potentially dating a client. I'm sorry, I am late, came a breathless voice from behind her. Sharon turned to find Peter jogging toward her, slightly disheveled and carrying what appeared to be a small plant. Traffic was impossible, and then this little guy nearly fell off a vendor's table on my way here. He held up a small potted basil plant with several crushed leaves. I couldn't toss leave him to his fate. The absurdity of a man who probably owned half of Manhattan rescuing a $3 herb plant made Sharon burst into unexpected laughter. "Had you rescued a basil plant?" Peter looked sheepishly at the scraggly green leaves. "I have a bit of an urban garden situation in my apartment. My mother says I adopt plants the way other people adopt stray cats." And he sat beside her, the plant nestled carefully between them. "I'm really sorry about being late." "It's okay," Sharon said, surprised to find she meant it. "Though your rescued plant friend makes me feel underdressed. I didn't bring anything except myself." Peter's gaze softened as it travelled over her face. "That is more than enough." And the sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Sharon's chest, and she quickly changed the subject. "So, no real estate talk. What should we discuss instead? How about why you re-wearing my grandmother's jade pendant?" The question was so unexpected that Sharon's hand flew to her throat. "What? This was given to me by an elderly Japanese woman at Golden Dragon restaurant 2 weeks ago. I helped her when she almost fell." Peter's smile grew wider. "That would be my mother, Satomi Sakamoto, and the pendant is one of a matched pair that belonged to my grandmother." He reached beneath his shirt collar and pulled out an identical pendant, the same intricate carvings catching the sunlight. "She gave this one to me when I was 10 and kept the other, until apparently deciding to give it to a kind stranger." Sharon stared at the matching pendants, her mind racing. "That was your mother. But why would she give me something so valuable?" Peter Chow's expression turned thoughtful. "My grandmother believed that these pendants would eventually find their way to two people whose paths were meant to cross. It sounds like mystical nonsense to my father. He was very practical, very business-minded, but my mother and grandmother have always been more intuitive." "So what? It is like some sort of cosmic matchmaking?" Sharon raised an eyebrow, skepticism warring with the undeniable coincidence. "I prefer to think of it as a particularly effective icebreaker," Peter replied with a grin. "And though I should warn you, if my mother finds out we've met, she'll start planning a wedding immediately." Sharon laughed, but felt heat rising to her cheeks at the mention of weddings. Well, let us not get ahead of ourselves. I don't even know what you do besides rescue plants and practice Tai Chi. Fair enough, Peter nodded. Official title, Executive Vice President of Sakamoto International Properties. Unofficial reality, the family disappointment who would rather restore historic buildings than tear them down for luxury condos. Family disappointment? Sharon echoed, finding it hard to imagine anyone being disappointed in the thoughtful man beside her. Peter's expression clouded slightly. My father built his company from nothing after immigrating here. He expects me to be as hungry, as driven as he was, but I've never had to fight for survival the way he did. He gestured to the greenery around them. I want to build things that last, that respect what came before. He sees it as weakness, cultural, sentimentality that has no place in American business. The vulnerability in his admission touched Sharon. Is that why you re-interested in the workshop as a restoration project? Peter nodded. It would be perfect for a community art space. The neighborhood is changing, but not everything new has to erase what came before. He looked at her curiously. What about you? How does someone who meditates in empty workshops end up selling real estate? Sharon sighed, picking at the edge of her skirt. Practicality. I am me putting myself through night school for interior design. Real. Estate pays the bills and gives me connections for later. She hesitated, then added, my parents worked factory jobs their whole lives. Education wasn't an option for them, but they made sure it was for me. Sometimes that means doing the practical thing now for the dream later. What's the dream? Peter asked softly. Restoration work, actually, Sharon admitted, taking spaces with good bones and bringing them back to life, honoring their history while making them functional for today. She looked down, suddenly embarrassed. It sounds silly when I say it out loud. Doesn't it sound silly at all? Peter said, his hand moving slightly closer to hers on the bench. It sounds like exactly what that workshop needs. Their eyes met, and Sharon felt a dangerous flutter of possibility. This man, with his plant-rescuing tendencies and his respect for history, was nothing like she'd expected. And the way he looked at her, like she wasn't just another struggling New Yorker, but someone whose dreams mattered, made her professional. Walls began to crumble. What Sharon didn't realize was that as they sat talking on that park bench, Peter's phone had buzzed 3 times with messages from his father. The offer on the workshop had been accepted. By tomorrow, he would officially be her client's son, and the ethical complications she feared would become very real indeed. The workshop looked different under the soft glow of string lights. Peter had insisted on showing Sharon his vision for the space, and somehow that had turned into an impromptu picnic on the dusty floor, take-out containers from his favorite ramen place scattered between them. 2 weeks had passed since their Central Park meeting, and despite Sharon's best intentions, she found herself inexorably drawn into Peter Sakamoto's orbit. So your father has no idea you've been seeing me? Sharon asked, twirling noodles around her chopsticks with practiced ease. Peter winced. And I've tried to tell him, but every conversation devolves into arguments about the development plans for this block. He wants to tear down 3 historic buildings to build luxury apartments. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. 2. Complicate things. My mother keeps asking about that lovely girl from the restaurant without realizing you were the same person I've been talking about. Thus Sharon laughed, though a note of unease crept into her voice. And what exactly have you been telling her about me? Peter's eyes softened in the dim light. That you see the world the way I do, that you understand why some things deserve to be preserved. He hesitated, then added more quietly, that you were the first person in a long time who makes me feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. The honesty in his voice made Sharon's breath catch. Over the past 2 weeks they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt dangerously natural. Lunch breaks spent exploring hidden corners of the city, evening phone calls that stretched into the early hours, and text messages that made her smile in the middle of dull meetings. But the practical part of her brain kept sounding alarms. "Peter, we need to talk about this," she said, setting down her chopsticks. "Your family owns the property I've been assigned to sell. There are ethical considerations." "I know," he interrupted, leaning forward. "That's actually why I wanted to meet here tonight. I have a proposition." Sharon raised an eyebrow, trying to ignore how the word proposition sent her heart racing. "I am listening. I want to buy this workshop, officially through your agency. You get the full commission." He gestured around them. "But instead of my father's development plans, I want to turn it into a community restoration center, a place where people can learn traditional crafts, where old furniture gets new life instead of ending up in landfills." That sounds wonderful, but..." "And," Peter continued, his eyes bright with excitement, "I want you to design it, not as my girlfriend, but as the talented designer you are. Paid, professional work that you can use to launch your own business." Sharon stared at him, emotions warring within her. "Girlfriend," she echoed, latching onto the one word that had made her pulse skip. Peter's confident expression faltered. I'm sorry. That was presumptuous. I just thought, the way things have been between us." "No, it's not that," Sharon said quickly, hating the uncertainty that had replaced his enthusiasm. "It's just, everything is happening so fast. 2 weeks ago, I didn't know you existed. Now you're reoffering me my dream job while we'd be sitting on the floor of a building your family owns." "Too much?" Peter asked, his vulnerability showing through. Sharon took a deep breath. "Maybe a little, but that's not even the biggest complication." "And what is your father?" Sharon met his gaze steadily. "You said yourself he has other plans for this property. What makes you think he'll accept yours?" The shadow that crossed Peter's face told her everything she needed to know. "You haven't told him," she realized aloud. "I was waiting." "For the right moment," Peter admitted. "He's hosting a family dinner tomorrow night. I thought maybe if you came with me, if he could meet you and see how passionate you are about restoration." "Meet his son, secret girlfriend, and business partner at the same time," Sharon interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Peter, that's a terrible idea." "Well, when you put it like that, how else should I put it?" Sharon stood up, suddenly needing space. "This isn't a romantic comedy. Your father is a powerful businessman who probably has very specific ideas about both who his son should date and what should happen to his properties." Peter rose to face her, his expression troubled. "Sharon, I am 32 years old. I respect my father, but I don't need his permission to live my life. It'd be easy to say when we never had to worry about making rent," Sharon shot back, immediately regretting the words when hurt flashed across Peter's face. "Is that what you think, that I'm just playing at all this?" His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it she'd never heard before. "That my interest in preservation, in you, is just some rich boy's hobby. No, Sharon closed her eyes, trying to gather her thoughts. "That is not what I meant. But you have to understand, the stakes are different for me. If this goes wrong, I don't have a family empire to fall back on. This could be my one shot." The tension between them stretched into silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the city beyond the workshop walls. Finally, Peter spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Come to dinner tomorrow, not as my girlfriend, not as a business partner, just as Sharon Harrington, a real estate agent who happens to have innovative ideas about urban preservation." He stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Give us a chance to show my father another way forward. After that, whatever happens between you and me, we'll figure it out one step at a time." Sharon looked up at him, at the earnestness in his dark eyes, and felt her resolve weakening. This was exactly the kind of complication she'd built her career avoiding, and yet, "Okay," she whispered, "I'll come to dinner." What Sharon couldn't possibly know was that across town, in a penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Hiroshi Sakamoto was already looking at a dossier on Sharon Harrington, her background, her career, her connection to his son, all compiled by the private investigator he employed whenever his family's interests might be at risk. And he was not pleased with what he had discovered. The Sakamoto residence was not what Sharon had expected. Instead of a sleek, modern penthouse, Peter had driven them to a modest townhouse in a predominantly Asian neighborhood, where shop signs in Japanese, Chinese, and Korean lined the narrow streets. The 3-story brick building looked well-maintained, but decidedly unpretentious. "You live here?" Sharon asked as Peter helped her from his car. Not the luxury vehicle she had anticipated, but a practical hybrid with a back seat full of potted plants. "My parents do," he corrected her. "I have a loft in Chelsea, but family dinners are always here. My father says it keeps him grounded, reminds him where he started." Peter hesitated, his hand on the small of her back. Listen, there is something I should warn you about." The front door swung open before he could finish, revealing a petite Japanese woman with an elegant silver bob and bright, intelligent eyes that Sharon immediately recognized. "You!" Sharon exclaimed at the same moment. The woman clapped her hands together in delight. "It is you, the kind girl from the restaurant." Mrs. Sakamoto turned to her son with a triumphant expression. "Peter, you didn't tell me she was your special guest." Peter looked between them with a bemused expression. "I tried to tell you both, but nobody would listen to me." His mother waved away his protest and pulled Sharon into a surprising hug. "I knew my mother's pendant would work its magic," she said, stepping back to examine Sharon more thoroughly, "though I didn't expect it to work quite so quickly." "Mother," Peter groaned, "please don't to scare her away before we even get through dinner." Mrs. Sakamoto laughed melodically. Come in. Your father is in his study on a call, but he'll join us soon." The interior of the home was a beautiful blend of traditional Japanese aesthetics and modern comfort. Tatami, mats alongside contemporary furniture, minimalist art pieces beside family photographs. Sharon noticed one particularly striking photograph of a much younger Mr. and Mrs. Sakamoto standing proudly in front of a tiny storefront with handwritten sign, "Sakamoto Real Estate." That where it all began, came a deep voice from behind her. 1 room, 2 desks, and a dream. Sharon turned to find herself face to face with Hiroshi Sakamoto. Though shorter than his son, he possessed a commanding presence that seemed to fill the room. His face was deeply lined, telling the story of a life built through determination, and his eyes, identical to Peter's, revealed nothing of his thoughts as they assessed her. "Father," Peter said, stepping forward, "this is Sharon Harrington." Sharon extended her hand. "It is an honor to meet you, Mr. Sakamoto. Your company's reputation is legendary in the industry." Hiroshi's handshake was firm but brief. "And yes, I know who you are, Ms. Harrington. Carson and Reed's newest agent, assigned to the Bleecker Street property." His gaze flickered to the jade pendant at her throat, and apparently the recipient of a family heirloom. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sharon glanced at Peter, whose jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. "Dinner is ready," Mrs. Sakamoto announced, either oblivious to or choosing to ignore the tension. "Have you prepared sukiyaki? My specialty." Dinner began awkwardly, with Mrs. Sakamoto, who insisted Sharon call her Satomi, filling the silence with cheerful questions about Sharon's background and interests. Peter remained uncharacteristically quiet, while his father observed the proceedings with calculating eyes. "So, Peter tells me you were studying interior design," Satomi said warmly, passing Sharon a bowl of rice. "Such creative work." "Yes," Sharon answered, grateful for the friendly overture. "I am particularly interested in historical restoration, preserving the character of spaces while making them functional for modern use." "An admirable hobby," Hiroshi commented, his tone making it clear he considered it nothing more, though hardly practical in a city where land values demand maximizing return per square foot. "With respect, Mr. Sakamoto," Sharon found herself saying, "I believe preservation and profitability aren't mutually exclusive. Restored historic properties often command premium prices because they offer something unique: character, craftsmanship, and connection to history." Hiroshi's eyebrow rose slightly. Bold words from someone who has yet to close her first major sale. "Father," Peter warned, but Sharon placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It is all right," she said, meeting Hiroshi's gaze directly. "You're right that I am new to real estate, but I've been studying restoration techniques for years, and I've seen how thoughtfully preserved spaces transform not just buildings, but entire neighborhoods." "Like the workshop on Bleecker," Peter added, seizing the opportunity. "Father, I wanted to discuss my plans for that property." "The plans are already finalized," Hiroshi interrupted. "Construction begins next month on the new development." Peter set down his chopsticks with controlled precision. "Without consulting me, I submitted an alternative proposal 3 weeks ago for a community restoration center." Hiroshi scoffed. "A money-losing venture based on sentimentality rather than sound business principles." "It wouldn't lose money," Sharon interjected, earning surprised looks from both men. "I've run the numbers. With the right business model, teaching workshops, offering restoration services, partnering with design schools, it could be profitable within 2 years while serving the community and preserving a piece of neighborhood history." Silence fell over the table. Satomi looked between her husband and son with worried eyes, while Hiroshi studied Sharon with newfound intensity. "You helped develop this proposal?" he asked finally. Sharon hesitated, not wanting to overstate her involvement. "I shared some ideas with Peter. The vision is his. But your relationship with my son began. When exactly?" The question hung in the air, its implications clear. Sharon felt heat rise to her face, but before she could respond, Peter spoke. "This isn't an interrogation, Father. Sharon is here as my guest, not to defend herself." "She is here," Hiroshi countered, "because you are attempting to use personal feelings to influence business decisions. A practice I specifically warned you against after the fiasco with the Thompson development." Peter's expression hardened. "That was different, and you know it. This is about preserving something valuable, not tearing it down for quick profit." "Everything I have built," Hiroshi said, his voice rising, "everything our family has achieved came from making difficult decisions based on reality, not romantic notions about the past." "Oh, Hiroshi," Satomi interjected softly, placing a hand on her husband's arm. "Perhaps we should—" "No, Satomi," he cut her off. "Our son needs to understand. We didn't come to this country, didn't sacrifice everything so he could throw away opportunities on impractical dreams." He turned to Sharon. "And you, Ms. Harrington, do you imagine my son's interest in you has nothing to do with your willingness to support his rebellion against family business practices?" And the accusation landed like a physical blow. Sharon set down her napkin and stood, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady. "Mr. Sakamoto, I appreciate your candor. You've built an extraordinary legacy through hard work and sacrifice. But with respect, your son isn't rebelling. He's evolving the vision you began, recognizing that preservation can be as valuable as development. She touched the jade pendant at her throat. Your mother believed in connections that might be measured on balance sheets. Perhaps there's wisdom in that perspective too. For a moment, no one moved. Then, to everyone's surprise, Hiroshi Sakamoto began to laugh, a genuine deep laugh that transformed his severe features. "You remind me of someone, Ms. Harrington," he said, his eyes twinkling with unexpected warmth. "A stubborn young woman who once told a bank manager that he was short-sighted for denying a loan to Japanese immigrants." He glanced at his wife with affection. "That woman became my wife and business partner." Satomi smiled, reaching for her husband's hand. "I told you she had spirit, didn't I? Just like the pendant predicted." Sharon looked between them in confusion. "I don't understand." Peter seemed equally bewildered. "Father, does this mean you will consider my proposal for the workshop?" Hiroshi straightened his napkin methodically. "It means, my son, that I will review your numbers with fresh eyes. If and only if they demonstrate a sustainable business model, we will discuss a modified approach." His gaze shifted to Sharon. "And it means, Ms. Harrington, that you have earned a second dinner at this table, next time perhaps with architectural drawings to accompany your convictions." It wasn't approval exactly, but it was an opening, one that neither Sharon nor Peter had dared hope for when the evening began. As their eyes met across the table, Sharon felt something settle into place, like the final piece of a puzzle. She had known she was solving. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by jade pendants, shared visions, and a growing love that had begun with a simple act of kindness in an Oriental restaurant. Epilogue. 1 year later, the grand opening of Sakamoto Heritage Workshop drew a crowd that spilled out onto Bleecker Street. The formerly dusty space had been transformed, original wooden beams restored to their warm honey color, hidden, architectural features uncovered and highlighted, modern touches blending seamlessly with historical elements. A plaque near the entrance bore the image of 2 intertwined jade pendants with an inscription in both English and Japanese, honoring our past, building our future. Sharon moved through the crowd in a vintage-inspired dress that complemented the space she had poured her heart into designing. Her first major project had exceeded even her own expectations, earning features in design magazines and bringing a steady stream of clients to her newly established restoration consultancy. "There you are," came a familiar voice, as Peter appeared beside her, 2 champagne flutes in hand. "Hiding from your admirers." Sharon accepted the glass with a smile, just taking it all in. "I still cannot believe we pulled this off." "I never doubted it," Peter said, his free arm slipping around her waist, "though I admit I didn't expect my father to become your biggest champion." Sharon laughed, remembering how Hiroshi had gradually shifted from skeptic to advocate, eventually providing additional funding when the project uncovered unexpected historical features worth preserving. The turning point had come during a heated debate over expensive traditional joinery techniques. Sharon had stood her ground, and Hiroshi had recognized in her the same determination that had driven his own success. Across the room, Satomi Sakamoto was proudly showing visitors the exhibition of neighborhood history that occupied one wall, while Hiroshi engaged in animated conversation with local business owners about the workshop's impact on the area. "Your mother keeps pointing at us and whispering to her friends," Sharon observed, raising an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" Peter winced. She may or may not be explaining how her mother's jade pendant prophecy is coming true before their very eyes. Sharon nodded sagely. "The cosmic matchmaking story grows stronger. Speaking of which," Peter set down his glass and reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment." Sharon. Their heart skipped as he withdrew a small box. Around them, the crowd continued to mingle, unaware of the private moment unfolding in their midst. "I had this made from a piece of the original workshop floor," Peter explained, as he opened the box to reveal a ring with a wooden inlay band supporting a modest but brilliant diamond. It seemed fitting, since this place is where our story really began. Sharon stared at the ring, emotions overwhelming her ability to speak. It was so perfectly them, thoughtful, unique, honoring history while creating something new. "Sharon Harrington," Peter said, his voice low and intended only for her ears, "would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because of jade, pendants or family expectations or cosmic matchmaking, but because I love your brilliance, your determination, and your heart that sees value in things others might overlook." Our tears pricked at Sharon's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, the man who had become not just her partner in love, but her ally in creating beauty from history. "Yes," she whispered, extending her trembling hand. "Etiti. 1,000 times yes." As Peter slipped the ring onto her finger, a cheer erupted from across the room. Satomi had been watching after all, and her delighted reaction had drawn everyone's attention to the couple. Hiroshi Sakamoto made his way through the crowd, his expression unreadable until he reached them. Then, to Sharon's surprise, he embraced her warmly. "My mother always said the jade pendants would find their way to two people who would build something lasting together," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I never believed her until now." As congratulations poured in from all directions, Sharon found herself surrounded by not just well-wishers, but a community that had formed around this restored space. Craftspeople, designers, historians, and neighbors who had discovered connection through preservation. Later that evening, when the crowds had thinned and only family remained, Sharon and Peter slipped away to the hidden alcove they had discovered on that first meeting. Now restored to its original beauty, the meditation space with its circular window framed the rising moon perfectly. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Peter asked, his fingers intertwined with hers, her new ring catching the moonlight. "About spaces holding memories but not being trapped by them?" Sharon smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I think you were the one who said that, actually." "Was I?" Peter laughed softly. "It seems we've been finishing each other as thoughts from the beginning." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant sounds of celebration mingling with the quiet pulse of the city beyond the walls. "You know," Sharon said finally, "when I helped your mother that day at the restaurant, I was just doing what anyone would do. I never imagined it would change my entire life." Peter brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "That is the beauty of kindness. You never know how far its ripples will travel." From the main room came the sound of Satomi's melodic laughter blending with Hiroshi's deeper chuckle, a harmony that spoke of decades of partnership through challenges and triumphs. "I think we have quite the legacy to live up to," Sharon murmured. Peter smiled, his eyes full of promise as they met hers. "We'll build our own day by day, starting right here, in this space that was waiting for us all along." As they rejoined the celebration, Sharon touched the jade pendant that still hung around her neck, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and that love, like the buildings they restored together, only grows more beautiful with time.